Tired of manual bank statement work? Meet OBSE, the smart way to extract, analyze, interpret, and visualize financial data from any South African bank's bank statement. From reconciling transactions to spotting financial red flags, OBSE turns raw data into real business intelligence. Built for lenders, trusted by analysts, essential for smart decisions. Visit oms.africa or email hello@oms.africa. OBSE. Know more, decide better. OMS, where innovation meets excellence.
Good morning, Cape Town.
Lester Kibet.
Starting your day
on Cape Talk.
It's 15 minutes past 8 o'clock. I spoke about this last week, and I've asked you if you've gone to see the Louis Theroux documentary on Netflix. It's called Inside the Manosphere. And this morning we're picking up on that conversation that really struck a chord with myself, but also with you. It's a space, the manosphere. It's a space online that's often blamed for shaping the certain ideas around masculinity. But what is really going on behind the scenes? There has been some new research conducted by the Center for Analytics and Behavioral Change that gives us some insight. They've analyzed more than 2 million social media posts from over 150,000 South African accounts and find that masculinity, it's not just evolving, there is a fierce contestation, the traditional expectations that, for example, men being the financial provider remain very strong, but it's also increasingly linked to stress and anxiety and mental health challenges that are affecting particularly young South African men. Carl Janse is a researcher for the Center for Analytics and Behavioral Change. Good morning, Carl. Hope you're well.
Good morning, Lester, and good morning to your listeners. I am well. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Firstly, your thoughts on the Louis Theroux documentary. Your thoughts simply as a viewer, but your thoughts also in some of the analytical work that you do in researching social media.
So I found the documentary quite an interesting one. And what stood out for me was almost a sort of dissociation with some of the participants in that documentary, with the one gentleman that grew up with quite a fierce and a loving mother that cared for him. And then you look at how he interacts with his mother compared to how he interacts with a woman in general outside of his mother, and he sort of dissociates the two. There was certain aspects where I thought the documentary could have spent more time, such as algorithm and how the algorithm amplifies manosphere, the incentivization of misogyny online as well. But overall, I think it captured just exactly what it should have correctly in terms of our work. These are, of course, narratives, conversations that we see play out, that we've investigated, and that we see play out in real time as well.
What was fascinating in some of the links that you make in your research, as well as in the documentary, it's the financial pressure and the impact on mental health. Many of the posts that you've been looking at link the traditional provider role to stress, anxiety, declining well-being. And in the documentary, I thought it was also maybe an under-discussed part when it came to the impact of how the promise of capitalism has felt. There was a part in that documentary where a young fan of one of these male influencers says, even if you work a 9-to-5 job for the rest of your life, you're still not able to make ends meet. How is financial stress impacting the minds of young men?
Yeah, well, it's exactly that. We show this pressure to be the breadwinner remains a massive source of anxiety in men and young men indeed. And amplified or sitting on top of that is the social media presence that we all engage in, social media platforms that we all engage in, where you can, the financial success is certainly in your face daily. And it is still a primary metric of a man's worth online. And that is both internally from the man And in certain cases, we see other genders also feed into that. No, my man needs to be the primary provider and things like that. So when men start to feel that they are failing at this, whether that's due to unemployment or economic pressure, doesn't just stay that financial worry. It becomes an identity crisis. And the silence surrounding this pain, this is quite damaging. And men start to internalize that failure, which really directly correlates with the mental health crisis that we are seeing.
A lot of this also then draws into consideration when we talk about last week. Stats SA released statistics on South Africans getting married later and later. The average for South African women is 39. For men, it's 35. We're also seeing an increase in divorce, with more women initiating divorce. And what the understanding here is, because women are rightfully becoming more financially empowered. The single biggest group of new home buyers in South Africa is young black South African women. That is absolutely great. We want to see it. But we're dealing also at the same time younger men or marriage ready men in terms of the age. They're feeling more disempowered by these movements.
Yes. So the way I like to always put it is that there seems to be a sense of contestation or a feeling that the pie isn't getting bigger. Instead, food is being taken off the man's plate and then put on to the woman. Of course, what we want to see is a woman being empowered. We want to see them actively contribute in the economy. However, and what we are also seeing with these influencers and these manosphere character types is they're saying that no, what is happening here is women are being empowered to the detriment of men in society, and it's leading to the emasculation of men. So again, feeding on that feelings of failure, feeding on that crisis.
Yeah. Social media shows us that women carry most of the work when it comes to caregiving, the scourge of absentee fatherhood in South Africa. 60% of children who are registered only have a one parent registered, and in almost all of these cases, it is the mother that is registered. You also noticed, or did you get an inkling of the role of or the lack of role that fathers play in the lives of some of these male manosphere types? That HS Tiki Toki guy, his father was a famous rugby player. He played for England. He was in South Africa during the 1995 World Cup. Somewhere at my mum's house, I have a photograph with me and Victor Obogo after I went to one of his English training camps in 1995. I feel that if Victor Obogo took more photographs with his son, we wouldn't be talking about a documentary called Inside the Manosphere.
That issue of absentee fatherhood, we drew a very interesting dichotomy in one of our previous reports, also focused on gender values and norms, where we see, Lester, this notion of being the provider and taking on that role as a provider from men. And it's really quite a pervasive narrative that we find online. However, on that same topic, we find something like the absentee fatherhood also remaining a significant point of discussion in the data. So I always found that difficult, where we have this notion that no, men must be the provider, and then at the same time we're sitting with the absentee fatherhood crisis in South Africa as well. And it's discussed as both a painful reality for many children and as a failing of traditional masculinity, where men are not socialized to be the nurturers. However, on the positive side, we do see, particularly in and around Father's Day at times, that there's conversations about involved fatherhood. We see fathers posting with their children, engaging with their children, coming out there and saying that, I'm actually trying to be a caring man for my child as well, documenting their role as that caregivers, changing nappies, attending school events, and being emotionally present as well. And these posts challenge that stereotype.
I'm speaking to Carl Janse, he's a researcher at the Center for Analytics and Behavior, talking about their research that ties in with this Louis Theroux Inside the Manosphere documentary. Carl, I'll reflect on something that a friend of mine told me, in that he has boys. They're great. They're respectful. They honor the woman in their lives and the woman that they associate themselves with. But this friend happened to look on their phones and look at some of the comments and look at some of how they interact on social media. How could these be two very different worlds, two different personalities? In real life, these young boys are typical but respectful young men, but online, the social media battleground, it's almost like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type of personality.
I'm going to give an anecdote experience from myself. Yeah, I remember could be 12 years ago, my first time joining Mixit. I'm not sure if your listeners are familiar with it, but my first time joining Mixit, that was also quite a sort of different experience for me, because on Mixit, I was similarly a very different person to who I was on in person, because I was a bit more out there, whereas in person I was more shy. And this is where that dissociation also links in, Lester, where we have them engaging essentially in a crowd of people, and you follow the sheep, as we say. Whereas in person, you get a different version. However, we must be very careful with that as well, because we are acutely aware of the fact that the portrayals that are online have the potential to spill offline more often than not. So we can have an individual that, for all intents and purposes, they are quite respectful in person. However, that what they propagate and engage with online can also feed into their private lives, and that is the online world is a very powerful force.
And I've spoken to other psychologists and those who deal with the negative impacts of a online life. It's not just the interactions, the communications that affect, but also the expectations when it comes to sex and sexuality, the impact that online pornography has on the impact on the brains of particularly young men, and what it means to have a healthy, intimate relationship with a partner, Carl?
100%. I've similarly read quite a bit of research around that, especially around the consuming of pornography from a young age, where it actually does shape your expectations in a partner, what you consider to be love, and how you receive and give love as well. So everything we engage with online has that offline consequence as well. And that's why the online space remains such a key aspect. And that's why it's such a highly contested space as well, because these bad actors know that whatever they do there has an impact, and they wield significant force there. South Africa has its own little manosphere and actors, particularly on X, that propagate certain narratives that are quite prominent and highly engaged.
Is it simply... I've read some of the comments. I note that there is also the backlash against positive change. It's the men who challenge these harmful norms that then face the ridicule. They're called simps. They're called beta males. And if I look at some of the responses in that documentary, I don't feel I personally don't feel shame. I don't feel hurt if someone were to direct, oh, you're being a simp, you're a beta. I reflected back and I asked myself, gosh, you're hurt so bad that you would resort to names in order to try and disguise the emptiness that you're feeling. Why is it that we have this backlash against positive masculinity when we're talking about the manosphere and the characters in the manosphere?
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's that sense of insecurity, and it's also a bit of polarization where these actors, they portray a certain type of masculinity, a hyper masculinity, toxic masculinity, and the audience 100% believes everything that what this individual is saying is 100% true, and anything that goes against that immediately becomes that point of contestation. And oh no, you're just trying to appeal to women, you're a simp, for example. Now, for myself and yourself, Lester, we might look at that, at a response like that, oh, you're a simp, and think, oh, well, I don't really care what you think. But imagine you're a 13-year-old boy or 14-year-old boy in that formative years. If you're constantly being ridiculed and made fun of, oh, you're a simp, that really does affect it's become cyberbullying at that point as well.
I don't know how personally. Look, I would want to try and save as many people as possible. But at what point do I say, just let them go? Because if also men, at one point, they're in terms of the characters in the manosphere, they're clearly suffering from trauma, mental health. But at the same time, they would say, "Oh, this issue around mental health is not real." That's the quote from the documentary. Mental health is not real. And if I think of some of these characters, these hyper masculine, uber masculine, they at the same time, while they say, while the men are ignored, the greatest number of suicides, happen amongst men. My response would be, say sorry to the people you hurt and then go seek therapy. It helps. If these people aren't listening, what do you then do?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing that I've found. Obviously, having done a lot of sort of work on myself as well, doing the therapy and all of these things, you realize that a lot of these preconceived notions of being the sort of uber masculine, hyper masculine, you don't really need to be that. You don't need to hold everything within you. You can be vulnerable. You can share your vulnerability with other people. And a lot of that is really a positive net effect on your mental health, on your well-being as a man as well.
Carl Jans, have to leave with you, but really appreciate your time. What's your thoughts